Good evening. 55,000 Palestinians lie dead beneath the rubble of Gaza. And now Israeli jets are pounding Iranian installations and daring Tehran to swing back harder. Washington's messages are muddy. Europe's calls for calm are met with rocket fire. And oil prices go upwards with every dawn strike. Tonight we've stitched the battlefronts together. The wargaming in Tel Aviv and Tehran, and the unbearable human arithmetic inside Gaza's pulverized streets. Is a ceasefire even conceivable, or are we sliding towards a regional war that no one will be able to contain? I'm Mark Summers. This is In Focus. Welcome to the program. Foreign Policy News outlines different exit ramps that could be taken after Israel's blitz on 100 Iranian military and nuclear sites yesterday. A face-saving ceasefire could let Tehran claim victory, while rearming or US and EU pressure might force Prime Minister Netanyahu into an abrupt pause. Foreign policy notes that Hezbollah's 2024 bruising and the decapitation of Iran's IRGC command leave Tehran scrambling. Its deterrent fraying just as Donald Trump signals both restraint and readiness to finish the job. In that fog of mixed signals, miscalculation is baked in. Iran could lash out at US bases it already assumes are complicit, while Israel may gamble that another week of this may cripple Iran beyond repair. Power plays in Washington, not just on the battlefield alone, may decide whether missiles stop or multiply and continue. Now, joining us from Cairo is Khaled Dawood, who's the managing editor of Ahram Weekly and also a veteran analyst of Middle East power politics. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Dawood. First of all, give me your assessment of where we are now, 39 hours into this conflict.
Well, thanks again, Mark, for having me. I wish we had something else to speak about other than wars and threats of expansion of tension in the region. But unfortunately, this is probably the most dangerous escalation we've seen since the beginning of the Israeli genocide war against the Palestinian people in Gaza. I mean, again, as you mentioned, almost like 2 days after this escalation from the Israeli side has started, I don't think we are heading still at all towards de-escalation or a sign that both sides are close to kind of wrapping up. Language about what is to come. I mean, the Israeli side saying that the worst is yet to come. I mean, that even though the strike that the Israelis have dealt has been huge in terms of the losses of the Iranian military leadership and assets and nuclear scientists. But again, probably the Israelis say that they still have more surprises that are going to cause more damage to the Iranian side. But at the same time, the Iranians, I think, at least they managed yesterday, despite their heavy losses, to also break havoc within Israel itself through this barrage of missiles they fired at Tel Aviv. Again, it's all relative. I mean, again, within an Israeli context, all analysts would agree that Israel, throughout its history of almost 80 years, we're talking about 77 years, they haven't seen that kind of shelling of buildings within Tel Aviv itself, bringing the state of life in Israel in general to a halt. Almost everybody is close to the shelters, and the Iranians are threatening more. I mean, it's not like the showdown that happened in October and in November, in which things were wrapped up in almost like a day, with each side saying that the message has been delivered. But this time, the extent of the Israeli action is leaving little room but for the Iranian side not to retaliate. But at the same time, they still have to be very careful. Both sides, actually, Mark, have to be very careful. I mean, again, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu can easily threaten and say we're going to decapitate Iran, terminate all its military capabilities. But of course, everybody knows that this is impossible. I mean, Iran is a big country, and at the same time, there are some, kind of leverages in the Iranian hands that are not related very much to advanced weaponry. Simply closing down the Strait of Hormuz in the Arabian Gulf, where like 1/3 of the world oil trade that goes through, is enough to cause tremendous damage to the entire international community. You can just imagine what would happen if some of the American bases in the Gulf region get attacked by the Iranians, as some of the Iranian officials have been threatening, halting the oil trade, attacking American bases, getting America involved into the war directly. This is sounds like a nightmare scenario that hopefully, maybe, some of the wise people among all recognize they don't want to reach that level.
Absolutely. We might come on to that.
Miscalculations could happen all the time, unfortunately.
Indeed, and we might come on to escalation even further in just a moment. But exactly how much leverage do you think Washington has right now over Netanyahu? I mean, Trump's public words has been mixed messaging at best. Do they have any leverage right now?
Super leverage. I mean, again, at the end of the day, no one else but the United States and this administration of the Trump administration that can provide the protection for the Israeli side in case this war expands. As I was mentioning, the Iranians have several cards in their hands. One of the big ones in them is disrupting the trade of oil through the Gulf. But also, yes, of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon was very much weakened after the Israeli killing of its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and the same terms of losing Syria. But still, I mean, the Lebanese front could easily escalate. We can see escalation on the Yemeni front. We can see escalation from the groups that support Iran within Iraq. So, I mean, if you're looking for nightmare scenarios, there are a lot of them available and do not necessarily depend on this super advanced capabilities that the Israelis definitely maintain. There is no question that Israel has an advanced air force compared to the Iranians, that they have better intelligence capabilities, as we've seen, basically infiltrating those elements, Israeli Mossad agents inside Iran itself, which is a major breach of Iranian security. Knowing the exact location of the Iranian scientists and the Iranian military leadership, these are all definitely
how can that even happen? You say that Israel has better intelligence than Iran. Does Iran have any intelligence agency at all?
I think that even according to Israeli officials and Israeli security agencies, they've been arresting people who've been charged with spying on behalf of Iran. And as I mentioned, again, there are some fronts. Yes, the Lebanese front has been weakened, but still the capabilities of Hezbollah, in case I'm talking of a major escalation on behalf of the Israeli side against Iran. Again, the attack that they've done has done a lot of damage, killing all those people, top leadership, military leadership, destroying the major the Natanz the nuclear plant that they have, destroying many missiles and missile batteries. Some people, again, if you're asking me the other question about the U.S. administration, some people think that Trump is blessing and even took part in the planning for those military strikes in hope that this would put pressure on the Iranians to go back to the negotiating table and accept the American conditions that the Americans have presented to them 2 months ago. So, again, this is one calculation. And hopefully, again, if you want to think in terms of sanity and the interest of the region and the world, definitely this escalation has to come to an end as soon as possible. But if you talk about, the possibilities of each side escalating, there are definitely tremendous possibilities for the Iranians, despite their limited capabilities, as I said, to turn many fronts volatile and a source of major tension, whether through Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, or through the Arab Gulf region and nearby American bases, disrupting the oil trade over there. So, I mean, the Americans are fully aware. I mean, it's not just Israel in this calculation. If the world economy goes through a major crisis because of this war, again, this war is not happening in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's happening in one of the richest regions in the world in terms of Gulf supply, in terms of oil supplies. And certainly, I mean, even the United States, despite all its support of Israel, wouldn't want things to get out of control. And again, if we take Trump for his word, he promised he doesn't want to start a new major war in which American soldiers, and this time it's going to be hundreds of thousands, would be involved just to support Israel. And it goes against his slogan of America first.
And can you see Iran hitting the oil supplies, hitting perhaps an American military base, or is it just rhetoric? That would be suicide for Iran, wouldn't it?
Well, if it's if like the Israelis keep on escalating, killing top Iranian leaders. I mean, some of the Israelis were so arrogant that they would say that we just they missed the supreme leader of Iran, Mr. Khamenei, and if they wanted to kill him like Nasrallah, they could have done so. They could have killed the Iranian president if they wanted. So if that's the attitude, I mean, again, the Iranians, obviously, Mr. Netanyahu is openly calling upon the Iranian people to overthrow the Iranian regime. So, I mean, again, if they reach that point in which they feel their existence is very much threatened, you cannot exclude any options. I mean, what would be worse? The Iranian regime feel that their end is near. There is this assumption by the Israeli side, by some Western experts, that the humiliation of this Israeli strike that might lead to internal dissent and revolt against the Iranian regime, like what happened with Syrian President Bashar Assad. But again, there is a counter argument that probably while being subjected to an outside attack, more Iranians would show solidarity and support for the regime being subject to an external threat. So you really don't know how things would go. But again, if there is some sanity among the world leaders, topped with the U.S. administration and big European countries, regional powers, I mean, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, all these countries, they do not want to see this crazy every day 100 times. Iran is so huge and so big, but the Iranians can do a few small things that can really turn life into a nightmare, not just for Israel, but for the United States and for the region.
Well, best possible scenario then is perhaps Israel and Iran exchange rockets and fire for perhaps a few weeks, not doing too much damage, and then Tehran comes back to the negotiating table with the United States. If that happens, and a ceasefire is called, nuclear talks are back on with the United States, Iran then would be in such a weak position, would it not?
That's certainly one thing the Americans and the Israelis are betting on. I mean, again, if they manage to get through this huge military strike by the Israeli side, very clearly supported by the U.S. president, who even threatened that he's going to send more weapons to the Israeli side to deal more heavy blows to the Iranian side. If that's the situation, that certainly will place the Iranian regime in a very weak position. But again, I mean, we've seen this formula relatively before the end of last year, when the Iranians and the Israelis exchanged the firing of missiles and attacks between the two sides, that there was a kind of an undeclared understanding that this would be limited, that this would only be tit for tat, each one showing that they can hit the other side. But at the end of the day, they don't want things to get out of control. Right now, the extent of the Israeli strike probably pushes the Iranians to perhaps, drag on with their attacks. But We've seen the Russian president offering mediation efforts, the Qataris offering mediation efforts, probably other nations in the Gulf region whom Trump visited recently. At the end of the day, Mark, if Trump wants to get $2 trillion out of the Gulf countries to invest in the United States, this will not happen if the war gets loose between Iran and Israel and involving the region and the United States. So it's in the interest of everybody, regardless of the future of the Iranian regime, will certainly be weakened, that this war comes to an end after each side. Again, at the end of the day, let's not minimize the effect of this Iranian attack on Israel anymore. There is no longer the taboo that Israel cannot be attacked from the outside by missiles by a rival or a kind of a competing nation. So that also affects very much the Israeli kind of thinking of security and the future of any wars that might happen in this region.
Okay, well, stay with us for just a moment because we'd like your insights further as we move on to talking about Gaza. Ahram Online reports 90 Palestinians killed and more than 600 wounded in just 48 hours as Israel shells aid queues and levels entire districts. Since March 18th, the reinvasion has added over 5,000 dead and 16,000 wounded to Gaza's ledger. Aid hubs run by the US-Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation have become, in the words of eyewitnesses, execution sites. 274 people slain while waiting for food. The Health Ministry's tally, 55,000 dead, 128,000 injured, 11,000 missing, may itself be an undercount. The Lancet and The Economist suggest the real toll could be up to 100,000 when starvation and disease are factored in. Every fresh crater deepens the diplomatic crater. ICJ genocide hearings gain new exhibits. ICC warrants inch closer, and global South capitals harden their condemnation. The longer bombs fall on Gaza, the narrower the runway for any Iran ceasefire might happen. Now, coming back to you, Mr. Dawood, when we talk about Gaza, 55,000 confirmed dead at least, perhaps double that as I was just mentioning, and the humanitarian catastrophe. How dangerous is it now for Gaza, the fact that the whole world's focus has shifted in less than 48 hours to this conflict between Israel and Iran?
Again, certainly the Palestinian situation is only getting more and more miserable. And as you've mentioned, the entire, world right now is totally focused on the situation between Israel and Iran and the possibilities of escalation in the Gulf region, the oil prices, all that kind of consequences that right now the Gaza plight, the Gaza insane humanitarian situation is going to be forgotten. I was reading one analysis that was noting that perhaps even the timing of the Israeli strike against Iran was particularly aimed to take place before this conference that's supposed to open in New York. I think in maybe tomorrow. I think about the country supporting the two-state solution, and there were expectations, Mark, that countries like Britain, countries like France would recognize the Palestinian state, and of course we've seen the United States warning against those steps. And generally speaking, the trend was, the entire world was bashing out Israel. Israel was getting isolated. No one would ever thought that Canada, Britain, New Zealand, and Norway would issue a joint statement warning of taking measures against Israeli officials and follow the British model on this respect, with imposing sanctions against extremist ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich. But right now, even by media standards, judging by the time we both would spend, if we have a half hour, 20 minutes news coverage, you would definitely spend 17 probably on Iran and Israel and the United States and oil and consequences, and a few minutes would be devoted to the disastrous situation in Gaza. So right now, again, the Palestinian people are going to pay even a heavier price, even though, I mean, again, some other analysts would point out that Israel right now, with this crazy, dangerous escalation in the war against Iran, would need to devote more attention and more concern to its border with Syria, with Lebanon. So, but at the end of the day, certainly after everybody was talking about the conference coming up in New York to recognize a Palestinian state, the chances for reaching a ceasefire deal, all this right now is taken a back burner because everybody's closely watching and following and expecting the worst, actually, out of this dangerous Israeli escalation and the decision that they want to go on a long distance war against Iran, knowing at the end of the day, Mark, let's always remember this, that Israel cannot expand this war without the tacit support of the United States, because they get weapons from them, they get protection from them. And even with this barrage of Iranian missiles, the Americans played a very vital, important role in intercepting many of them. So, I mean, if Trump wants to tell Israel enough is enough, you've proved that you can heavily bomb Iran. Let's bring this to an end and get back to the original source of trouble and bloodbath in the region over the past 2 years, which is the ongoing genocide war in Gaza. That would be hopefully the best case scenario. Although, I mean, again, I'm being on the pessimist side. Over the past 2 years, things are only getting worse. And Netanyahu thinks now this is the peak, that this is the ultimate aim, targeting the head of the snake, as he calls it, Iran, that provides support for all the resistance groups, as they call themselves, Hezbollah, Hamas, all these organizations. But right now, again, the future of the entire region is at stake, and we cannot allow Israel alone to dictate the future of this region.
And before we go back to the geopolitics of things, tell us a little bit about this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and what's happening on the streets of Gaza as people are trying to feed themselves and get aid packages.
This is another horrifying, part of the day-to-day suffering of the Palestinians living in Gaza. I mean, again, it's a very, I don't know, I can't even find the words, Marks. How sad is this story that every day people go there despite all the threats they know? I mean, since this distribution system has started, there's been an average of 20, 30 people getting killed every day at those distribution points. And nevertheless, Palestinians continue to go there because the food situation, food security situation is so horrible. And they are all facing starvation practically after, but we're talking since March 1st, we're talking now 3.5 months of total closure, that people are basically, threatening their own lives in order to get a pack of flour or, some food, some canned food, which perhaps, as one person was writing, they cannot cook because they don't have the gas to pay. But again, at the end of the day, I think this particular, insistence on behalf of Israel and the U.S. administration to continue the work of this suspicious organization that nobody knows who's paying the money for them is part of their plan to assure the permanent Israeli security presence in Gaza Strip and to replace the existing system of food distribution that's been run for decades by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, and the World Food Program, those people who have expertise. Again, it's simple math. These organizations, they have something like 4,000 distribution points all over Gaza. This new Gaza humanitarian, so-called humanitarian, because there's nothing humanitarian, to be honest, about their work. Yeah. This foundation, they have 3 to 4 distribution points, squeezing Palestinians in totally inhumane conditions to get those kinds of rations.
Indeed, and then shooting first and saying, well, they were walking a threatening manner. It's quite disgusting, but we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much for joining us, Khaled Dawood, joining us from Ahram. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mark.
From missile flashes over Asafan to candlelight vigils in Rafah's ruins. This is the situation that we're in at the moment, and we will continue to watch to see how the situation between Israel and Iran turns out and how it develops over the coming hours and days. Thanks for watching. Good night.